Hello there. Howdy, all that good stuff. My mustache shedded. I'm Robert McKay. That's the only thing that doesn't appear on the title cards. Might as well give it that real phony, real pretentious enunciation, because it's pretty pretentious to call them title cards, isn't it? But this is a whiskey review, and I have an unusuality for you. First, such a huge bottle. It's gigantic. By the way, learn to use the word massive correctly. Massive refers to mass, the density and weight of a thing. A piece of lead yay big is more massive than a piece of styrofoam yay big, because it has more mass. A balloon the size of Cleveland is less massive than a spoonful of neutronium from the core of a neutron star. Use massive correctly. It does not mean big. It means that it has a lot of mass to it. There are plenty of other adjectives that adequately convey great size: cyclopean, huge, gigantic, gargantuan. So learn to use English correctly. That way you'll communicate what you mean to communicate. Words mean things. Anyway, it's such a big bottle. This is the Balvenie. People call it Balvenie. I look at it, I sound it out, I see Balvenie. My guess is that in Scotland it's Balvenie or something like that. But however you pronounce it, it's Balvenie Caribbean Cask. It's a 14-year-old Scotch whiskey, Scottish whiskey. Scotch is just an obsolete English term, not Scottish, English term for that which is Scottish. And this is the very first Scottish whiskey I ever had. It was the Balvenie Caribbean Cask. It is, as I say, 14 years old. According to the label, this single malt spent many years maturing in traditional whiskey oak casks before being transferred to casks that had previously held Caribbean rum for a final period of maturation. You notice there's a word, I would say it so precisely, and then look up at the camera. In Europe, they have specific terms for specific size barrels. I'm an American. More specifically, I'm a Southerner. More specifically, I'm a hick. They're all barrels. But this comes from Scotland. I guess we have to let them have their strange little idiosyncrasies of British English. It's Dufftown, Banffshire, Scotland. I believe that's in the lowlands. It might be a Speyside. I don't know. There are 5 Scottish whiskey regions, and I know very little about any of them. It's a single malt, which means it's 100% sprouted barley from one distillery. It's not blended. It's not multiple distilleries. It's all one distillery. And this particular bottle, I got it on the 29th of November, cost $23. It's already rubbing off of here. 49, I think, is what I wrote. It could be 44. I think it's 49. But my very first Scotch whiskey was this Balvenie Caribbean Cask. Let me remember one of the reasons I have my platform here. That's about where I want to pour it to. Just a few minutes ago I had my second glass overall of Glenfiddich 12 and decided no, I don't care for Glenfiddich. But watch what happens when I slide this off the platform and it drops down to the basic level. You can't see the level, and that's how I tell what I'm pouring. I had just begun drinking whiskey. I believe it was November of 2021 this happened. I'd started in September. And in the MeWe Whiskey and Whiskey group, 2 words because it uses the 2 spellings, the original spelling was without an E, and the Irish added an E in to differentiate their stuff from everybody else. And this stupid rule about how you have to use the E if there's an E in the name of the country is just somebody made it up. Although it does seem to be that that's how things work. Generally, there are distilleries here in the States which has the E in the name, 2 E's in fact, one in United, one in States. There are distilleries here in the States which use the Scottish spelling. But in the Whiskey and Whiskey group on MeWe, a guy named Gary Johnson, who has since unfortunately died, sent me 4 samples, one of which was this whiskey, the very first Scottish whiskey I ever had. And if I remember correctly, out of those 4 samples, it was the only one I really cared for. One was the standard Angel's Envy, which I didn't like. I recently tried it again, still don't like it. The other was the Old Forester Statesman, which I didn't like. I do like their 100 proof, but I went a long time without trying it just because I didn't care for the Statesman, which it turns out is, I think, 86 proof, low proof. This, by the way, is 86 proof, but when you're drinking foreign whiskey, foreign to the United States, you get used to a lower proof because to get anything higher, it costs even more. You'll remember this was a, what did I say, $24 pint. For a 5th, it would be, I can't remember what they're selling them for at Total Wine, but I'm not that big a fan. Whiskey you have to import very naturally costs more. It costs more to get it from point A to point B when point A is in Scotland than it does when point A is in Bardstown, Kentucky, or Waco, Texas, or Lynchburg, Tennessee. Being Scottish whiskey, it's light in color, although it's darker than some, and maybe that comes from the rum barrels. And I don't know rum. I haven't had a taste of rum since, I believe, 1979 when I was in Korea, and then I was drinking rum and Coke. So, I don't know rum. How much of what I'm going to tell you comes from the rum, I don't know. It's sweet, as Scottish whiskey tends to be, if it's any good. There's some you get the sourness. My limited experience tells me that's when it's got a fair amount of grain whiskey, anything besides barley in it. And from what I understand, when grain whiskey in Scotland and Ireland is usually corn, and I've found that real corn-forward corn whiskey made out of majority corn, tends to be sour. And so, again, limited experience, but in my experience, the sweetness is what you get from the better quality Scottish whiskey. It's fruity. It's not a pineapple note exactly, but that's what it's making me think of. And I think maybe there's some mango in there. It kind of reminds me just a little bit of the nose of a Balcones barley whiskey. I haven't reviewed it yet, but I've got a bottle of their Mirador barley whiskey. I love their lineage barley whiskey. And this is reminiscent of the Balcones barley whiskey. Makes me wonder if Balcones isn't aging their barley whiskey at least somewhat in used rum barrels. There's honey in there. This is somewhat, just a little bit, reminding me of the nose on Glengoyne. I have a bottle of that, which I also haven't reviewed. During the period when I was rebuilding my Whiskey Basics playlist, I got a whole backlog of things to review, and this is one of them. It's a nice, pleasant nose. It wouldn't take much, though, to be cloying. It's right on the edge of almost being too sweet. But it's definitely fruity, and barley whiskey does give that fruitiness. It's a thin mouthfeel, almost watery, and at 86 proof, of course it is. Automatically swirl my whiskey. Sometimes I find myself doing it with my Coke too. After having had that first sip, I'm getting a little bit of woodiness on the nose. Something almost sharp and salty, maybe. And I've said it many times in these videos, but taste and smell connect together. If you've ever noticed when your nose is all stuffed up, the taste of things is not the same. You may be eating something that you love, but if you can't breathe through your nose, it tastes different. It doesn't necessarily taste bad, but it doesn't have the fullness of the flavor because so much of taste is smell. And so I go back and forth. That's weird. This is my second glass of this from this bottle, and it doesn't taste the same as it did on the first one. I was getting some kind of a cinnamony note, and that was about all, and I don't understand it. Now, palates change over time. They change from day to day. They can change through the day. And maybe it's that Glenfiddich that I had that ruined my palate for this. I don't know. But let me try again. That's better. I got honey, and mixed in with the honey various sorts of fruitiness, tropical fruit like, and I didn't get these specific notes, But I thought of pineapple, I thought of mango, maybe I thought of banana, and a citrus note came through there, like an orange. And there was that little bit of cinnamon, and that no doubt come from the wood. Scotland uses mostly used bourbon barrels, and the charring and the American oak, you char American oak, it does things to the chemical composition, and one of the wood notes that goes into the whiskey is cinnamon. Now in Scotland they'll use the same barrel over and over and over till it's not doing anything. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I wish American law would allow that. But for almost every kind of American whiskey, the federal government requires that you use new charred barrels. You got to do that with rye whiskey. You got to do it with bourbon whiskey. You got to do it with barley whiskey. Now, if you want to use some other barrel, say a recharred barrel, you can, but all you can do is call it, at that point, just call it American whiskey. It's not bourbon, it's not officially rye whiskey, it's not officially American single malt. And it really hamstrings American distillers. If they want to fit into a category, they have to use barrels once and then get rid of them. And Scotland and Ireland and all sorts of countries around the world take advantage of our profligacy. Each sip is getting better. And now on the finish, I'm getting red pepper. There's a stripe running down the middle of my tongue. I've got oak. And I don't normally get a lot of oak from a Scottish whiskey because it's those used barrels. It's leaching everything out of the wood. But here you've got them aging it and then sticking it in the rum barrels, and so it's getting more wood influence than most Scotch would. And I got wood, and there's this little charcoaly, ashy note now running down the back or the middle of my tongue. It's not the greatest finish. It didn't turn to chocolate as I would have liked, but it's not bad. Now, my first love is bourbon. I got rid of the Glenfiddich, so I now have on hand 4 barley whiskeys. I did have 5, which is the most I've ever had. 4 of them were from Scotland. Now I got 3 from Scotland, this being one of them. And it's probably going to be years before I have such a concentration of barley whiskey, of Scottish whiskey at one time. This is not something I want to have on hand all the time, but it's not bad. In fact, that's a good summary. It's not something I want to have on hand, but when I get a hankering for Scottish whiskey, you could do worse than this. I could do worse. It may be 2-3 years before I ever buy one of these again. Quite frankly, I think Balcones does barley whiskey better than anybody else I've ever tasted. Scottish, American. Only one that really comes close in my view, my limited experience, is Nirvana from the John Paul distillery in India. I had a sample of it back in the spring, maybe it was. I don't remember for sure. And I said, I want to get a bottle of that someday. Looked at the Total Wine website. There it was, big as life and twice as hairy. Oh, cool. And then come about September of this year, and I wanted to go ahead and get the bottle. It ain't there. It's not even showing up as out of stock. I guess they quit carrying it. It doesn't show up on Jubilation Wine and Spirits website. And I ain't going to order a bottle of it from India. I could probably go to one of these online liquor sites and order it, although the last time I checked, New Mexico law doesn't allow the shipping of spirits into the state. But you know, it's not up to Balcones, but it's not bad. My Hick whiskey rating scale, it's designed to evaluate bourbon, because that's mostly what I drink. Bourbon, rye, corn whiskey, things that are distinctly American, that are full-bodied and more densely flavored than even this. But I'm going to go ahead taking into account what it is. If this was an American whiskey and was of this quality, I'd give it a lower rating. But because it's low proof, having come from Scotland, because it does age in them used barrels, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 6. The numbers are higher, the higher on the scale, which is fine. That's 3.75 stars, 75 out of 100, 7.5 out of 10. It's I won't say it's my favorite Scotch. That still is Laphroaig 10-year. I've not had anything else from Laphroaig. But this is pretty good. And someday, as I say, might be a few years, I'm liable to buy another one. And since this is Scottish whiskey, sláinte.